So we'll get started. My name is Tyler Seawald. I'm the training manager for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Um, and this is the Q&A for the district wildlife manager and park ranger positions that have been announced by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So our purpose for this Q&A is to go over what these positions are and the steps within the hiring process, and then also to allow people who are interested in applying for these positions to submit questions to us and for us to answer any questions that you guys have about this process. There are several people on this call, and I'm going to let them do some introductions real quick. The first person I'll start with is Todd Schmidt. He is the other training manager for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So Todd, if you want to introduce yourself real fast.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. I appreciate you being here. Happy to answer questions that you have as we go along. I started with Parks and Wildlife a little while ago, about 19 years, and have moved through being a game warden up to the point where I'm one of the training managers now. So happy to answer questions. Glad you joined us.
And then Krista LeCavalier is our training assistant. She kind of keeps all the wheels on the training program. So Krista, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks everybody for joining. My name's Krista. Like Tyler said, I'm the program assistant in our training unit. I've been with Colorado Parks and Wildlife for about 7 years total now. I started my time as a customer service representative and moved into this position about 3 years ago.
All right. And then Kayla, do you want to introduce yourself from HR?
Hi, my name's Kayla Pippian. I am the CPW selection specialist, and I've been with DNR for about 3.5, 4 years.
Okay. And then Christy is not on this. Is she on this call or going to join?
She will be on shortly.
Okay. So Christy Ryan is also an HR specialist with Kayla, and then Grace Healy. I'll let Grace introduce herself.
Hi, happy to have you all here on your Friday evening. My name is Grace Haley, and I'm our benefits leave and ADA administrator for DNR.
And then Mary Beth, who also works in our human resources. Mary Beth, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. My name is Mary Beth Ostrike. I will never ask you to remember that last name because it's horrible. I'm an HR specialist, and I do workers' comp administration and learning and development.
Perfect. Thank you. Everybody's on this call, hopefully, so between one of us, we can answer any questions that you have. And we do tend to get a variety of questions. And so we'll try to answer these to start here in the first part of this presentation, and then we'll leave time at the end to get to as many questions as we can. So first thing is you guys can submit questions through the chat, and then the folks that just introduced themselves are going to do their best to answer those questions. And then they will also relay some of those to me, and I can try to address them as they come in if we're seeing common questions that keep repeating themselves. So feel free to hit the chat button and submit those as we go through this presentation. All right, let me see if I can, there we go. So first thing is this position for district wildlife manager and park ranger is open nationwide. And one question that we often get is some people are not super familiar with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So I just want to kind of give a brief overview of what it is that we do as an agency. And first thing is our mission statement is a quick summary and kind of the easiest way to summarize what we do. And that is that we perpetuate the wildlife resources of the state. We provide a quality state park system, and we provide an enjoyable and sustainable outdoor recreation opportunities that educate and inspire current and future generations to serve as active stewards of Colorado's natural resources. More in particular, we administer the state's trail programs. We register boats, snowmobiles, off-highway vehicles. We manage river outfitters. And then we work through customer service for recreational programs, amenities, and services. I had one more slide. It must not have made it through here. But in general, we do manage all the wildlife resources of Colorado, and then our state park system, which is over 40 state parks. So these two positions, firstly, the district wildlife manager position, just kind of a quick overview, and this is very broad and just job responsibilities for these. The district wildlife manager is what most people would call a game warden. You'll see between that and the park ranger, this is a little bit of a comparison of how these jobs differ in their major job responsibilities, but we are largely customer service based. CPW is an enterprise agency, and we do operate on the on our own funding sources, and so we do rely on the customers that use and buy hunting licenses and visit state parks and all the other programs that we manage. So customer service is a large part of what we do. But our district wildlife managers are more involved in the wildlife management and the day-to-day management of our wildlife. They do a lot of education and interpretation. Sometimes that comes in the forms of like hunter education, some wildlife programs, and working with their communities to educate people on wildlife issues. And then they are also law enforcement officers. They enforce all of the wildlife laws and regulations of Colorado, especially when they come to like hunting and fishing and all of the and all of the recreation that applies to wildlife wildlife management. Park rangers, like I said, they're also very customer service oriented. They are involved in the park management, so they are assigned to a state park, and they work within the day-to-day management of that park. Also heavy in education and interpretation. They often visit schools. We do a lot of water safety programs and and just a variety of other interp type programming that we get requests for. And then also all of our park rangers are commissioned law enforcement officers in Colorado to enforce mostly our outdoor recreation regulations and statutes, but also other all other state regulations and statutes. These are the minimum requirements for these two positions. They do require a bachelor's degree. For a district wildlife manager, that degree is required to be in biology, ecology, or another closely related field. We look at all the applications that come in to make sure that they meet that requirement for the district wildlife manager, and we take a close look at coursework if there's any question about whether that position is applicable or if it's outside of the biology, ecology, or other science related field. Park rangers, we accept any four-year degree or any bachelor's degree in any field of study. So that one is less limited and more wide open when it comes to your degree requirements. You are required to pass a background check. We conduct a pretty thorough background check, which involves talking to your former employers, friends, family, and then also doing a background check on your criminal history, social media checks and things like that, just to ensure that because we are hiring you as a post-certified police officer, that we don't want to hire somebody that is not able to meet those requirements or that might be disqualified from serving as a peace officer in Colorado. I should mention that all of our district wildlife managers and park rangers are level 1 peace officers in Colorado. They hold the same commission as a trooper or a deputy or any of your city police officers. So they do have the authority to enforce any of those laws that apply statewide. We tend to kind of manage ourselves in that we use that law enforcement as it relates to managing our parks and wildlife areas and the wildlife resources and outdoor recreation resources of Colorado. We do require that you pass a physical fitness test. I will talk more about that in a minute. And then we do not have an age out requirement. So I've had several questions about if there is an age requirement or a maximum age for being a Colorado Parks and Wildlife officer, and there is not. We do have a minimum age, and the only reason we have that is because you're required to be 21 to be post-certified. that just means that you have to be 21 by the time you generally by the time you take your post certification test. So so hopefully that helps out. We get a lot of questions about that. Talk a little bit about our hiring process. So the way the process works is that the applications are open now. They opened September 1st and they'll remain open through September 30th, and they close at 12 p.m. Those applications, as they come in, we are reviewing them weekly and then looking to make sure that the applicants all meet the minimum qualifications. So that is done by our human resources team. They will take a look at those qualifications, and then as long as you pass the minimum qualifications, then they are sent to Krista and myself. So then we can send you a link to your background check. That background check is a program that we use called Guardian. So you'll receive a link from us that enters you, actually from Guardian, that is a request for you to begin filling out your personal history questionnaire, or PHQ. So that requires you to fill out all of your information that is required from us to do your background check. So it's going to be pretty thorough. It's going to require a lot of information just about your past history, some of your work history, and things like that. So so as we go through the process, that background check is going to be completed by a couple of our investigators who help us with that process. And that typically will run through this hiring process. And we try to have that wrapped up by the time we hit these executive management interviews. So I'm sure there'll be questions about the background check, and we can kind of answer those as they come in. Once the application process closes at the end of September, we will be sending out a written test or an online exam, and that exam is a 100-question multiple choice quiz, and that is different for the district wildlife manager position and the park ranger position. But those are testing your knowledge in a variety of topics, including CPW general knowledge, and then some job specific knowledge. There's some knowledge about Colorado specific outdoor recreation or wildlife type questions. And so you would have, I think you have about a week, and I have the timelines on the next slide, but you have about a week to take that exam and submit that online. And then there's also a writing prompt, and that writing prompt is more or less an essay where you will be required to fill out that essay, submit that, and then that is graded independently of your exam. And then that score from the writing prompt is applied to your oral panel. We do have oral panels the following week after your exam, online exam. The oral panels are going to be a 40-minute interview with 3 of our staff members. Those panels are going to be made up of some of our commissioned officers, non-commissioned officers, and people that are involved in a variety of job duties throughout CPW. And generally that oral panel is going to have several types of questions to kind of assess you as a candidate. And that will also include a 5-minute presentation on a topic that they will give you at the time of the interview. So so there will be a 5-minute, 5-minute, they'll allow you 5 minutes to give a presentation on that topic at the time. So and I don't think that we've determined what that topic is just yet. We do have the physical fitness test. So we have polygraph and physical fitness test. And the way that works is we will schedule you, if you make it through the oral panels, you'll be scheduled for a polygraph appointment, and that is done here in Denver. So that is the one time that you do have to show up in person. And then the evening of that you're scheduled for your polygraph, we'll conduct the physical fitness test, and that will begin about 6:30 p.m. and we do that at the Inglewood Recreation Center indoors. And that's going to consist of 21 push-ups in under a minute, 28 sit-ups in under a minute, run 300 meters in 72 seconds, and then a walk, run, that is 1.5 miles in 17 minutes. You have to complete all 4 of those. If you don't meet one of those, it's considered a failure. For the push-ups and sit-ups, we ask that you complete them without stopping or without resting on the ground or anything like that. And where we typically see a failure with the physical test is just people failing to prepare for that. So we try to put this out there early so you have a chance to start working out and going to the gym and preparing to meet these standards. So if you're in this process and you're applying with us, I would highly encourage you to start, if you're not already running and going to the gym and doing sit-ups and push-ups, is to start training for that to make sure that you can meet that standard. So it's a fairly easy standard as far as physical fitness test goes. And it's kind of a bummer for people who get that far in the process and then to not make that requirement and then be removed from the process. The polygraphs, we get a lot of questions about what the polygraph entails. So we use a vendor that provides that polygraph. And generally the way that works is when you show up for your appointment, you're going to be asked to fill out I think it's a 2-page questionnaire about some of your history. What they're looking for is that you're honest with your past history and on some of the questions of things that may have taken place in your past. We're not so much assessing the things that you've done, but we're assessing your honesty and just admitting to those. Where we've typically seen failures in the polygraph portion is that we get the results back and people have disclosed things that don't necessarily remove you from the process, but they did not, it appears on the polygraph that you're probably hiding more information. So my recommendation when it comes to polygraphs is just be open about your history. Don't lie on the polygraph. We understand that everybody has a history of some type, and it's not uncommon for us to see, like minor misdemeanors or maybe run-ins with law enforcement in the past, or maybe a DUI or doing something that maybe you're not necessarily proud of. That doesn't remove you from the process. Everybody's human, everybody's made mistakes. You're not going to be the only one that has those, but just lying and not being truthful through the polygraph process is certainly probably the biggest way to not pass through your polygraph portion. And then we'll talk, like I said, we'll talk about the timeline because I don't remember the dates off the top of my head, but during that same week of polygraphs and physical fitness tests, we will then have the executive management interviews. What that is a interview with our executive management team. Typically that's our region managers and our assistant director of field services, who you can just think of them as our chief of law enforcement. And we'll have that's more of an interview to learn more about you as a person and not so much about your background, but just kind of who you are and how you would fit into this agency or into this role. And so it's really just kind of a final, it's just our way of our executive management team kind of putting a final check mark on your process. So after that, we would give you a conditional job offer. And while that conditional job offer is out there, we're going to send you some links to get a medical exam, a drug test, and a psychological evaluation. And those all can be done from wherever you're applying. So those are usually offered through a variety of different locations that are offered nationwide. So really the only time that you would need to make a trip to Colorado if you're applying from out of state is to come through for the polygraph, the physical fitness, and then later in that week you would have your executive management interview. So trying to accommodate you so you only have to make one trip during that process. So this is a timeline. So like I said, your applications would be due by September 30th. The written exam and the writing prompt are due by October 9th. So that gives you about a week to complete those. And then from October 15th through the 17th is when we're going to hold the oral panels. And like I said, those are going to be online and done virtually. So you don't need to come for that portion. And then October 30th through November 6th. And if you're looking at your calendar, that includes a weekend, but we wouldn't conduct these over the weekend. So except for that Saturday and Sunday in that time frame, we'll be holding polygraph appointments and then your physical fitness test on those evenings. The executive management interview is going to be the 7th and 8th. So if you're coming in from out of state, I'd recommend that you maybe think about making your polygraph appointment for the 5th or 6th. So then on the 7th or 8th, you could come to your executive management interview and kind of minimize how much time you need to spend in Colorado for that process. And then we would be anticipating a start date of January 2nd of 2025. So if you guys have applied with other states, you'll recognize that this is a pretty fast process for these types of positions. In some states, this is a year-long process, or in even longer in other states. So we do try to keep this moving pretty quickly, and try to make it as easy and painless for all of you that are applying. So just a couple things. You do have to have a Colorado driver's license before your first day. That is something that you would need to get. So if you're given a conditional job offer, I would recommend that you start working towards getting a Colorado driver's license. Easiest way to do that in Colorado is to have a couple pieces of mail that are in your name with a Colorado address, or if you can have some utility bills that are changed over to a Colorado address, and things like that. But we would need to start working with you to get a Colorado driver's license so that you can continue through the post academy and getting post certified in Colorado. We do require that honesty and integrity are required throughout the hiring process. That is something that we find a lot in this when we review applications and we review the polygraph, is that typically the biggest thing that is disqualifying people from being hired with us is that we're finding issues of honesty and integrity. So people just lying about work history, or lying about criminal history and things like that. Like I mentioned before, is we're okay that there are things in your background that you're maybe not proud of, but we just want to know about them so we can make a good decision based on a risk assessment of, how risky are you to hire as a Parks and Wildlife officer. And so we just ask that you not try to hide those from us, because typically in your background check that those things are going to pop up somewhere. So just be honest throughout this process. Talk a little bit about the training year. So when you're hired and you start on that January 2nd date, you are considered a full-time employee. You do receive benefits. So you're going to be an employee of Parks and Wildlife, which is a division under the Department of Natural Resources in Colorado. Your first assignment is going to be in Denver for that first year. So you're going to be assigned to our headquarters here at 6060 Broadway. And you're going to receive a salary of about $56,000 for 2025. I'll talk a little bit more about salary, I think, in a bit, but generally your first year, when you're considered a District Wildlife Manager 1 or a Park Manager 1, you both make $56,000. In year 2, I actually have these numbers. In year 2, your monthly pay would go from $46.69 to $49.03, and then you would go up from there in year 3 and so on. So generally it would stop at year 3, I believe, if I remember correctly, with the new changes. You would start the post academy in January. You will be in the academy at Arapahoe Community College from January through May. That is to become a post certified officer for us. And that academy will generally end around mid-May, in which case then you would come back to our headquarters, where you're going to run training from mid-May through December, or roughly June through December. That training year is from that mid-May through December is going to involve a lot of CPW specific training, including your field FTOs, your field training rotations. And then we offer a variety of training like water survival, statutes and regulations that apply to Colorado Parks and Wildlife. We're going to do some skills-based training, especially on like firearms, probably some ATV training, some boat training, and then a variety of like classroom training that are focused on job specific things like, for district wildlife managers, it might be how to deal with bears and mandatory check stations and things like that. So, so that's what you would be doing from May through December. As we approach the end of the year, you're going to have a placement date. And so for parks and districts, those are going to be assigned near the end of the training year. And right now that's happening in October. So throughout the year, we try to give you a list of job openings and, at the parks and districts that have openings. So you can kind of monitor those and start to think about where you would want to work. And then as we approach that placement day, we give you time with some park managers and some area wildlife managers to kind of talk with them and find where you want to and how you want to rank your job openings for where you want to be placed. So the way placement would typically work is during that placement day, all the managers come in, you do a presentation with them, and then we do try to take into consideration where you want to work and where the best fit is going to be for you, and try to minimize disruption to your life as much as possible. But we do try to accommodate what fits your needs the most. It doesn't always work out that way, but I think for the most part, I think we're doing pretty well on putting people where they want to go based on the openings that are available at the time. Once you're assigned to your first work location, we do ask that you stay there for 2 years and just put in 2 years at that location before you start to put in for transfers. But you would be welcome to put in for a transfer to another location if that's where you would want to go. But that, we try to keep you there just to fill that position, so we're not filling it the very next year with another location or with another new trainee. The state does pay for your relocation after you're assigned to that first district or that first park. So there is help with those moving costs, and so we do help you with that. So we try to take that burden off your shoulders for that move. Couple things to know is that if you haven't worked for CPW before, or you're not familiar with what our officers do, our game wardens and park rangers, they do work a lot of night shifts. They work a lot of weekends, and they do work a lot of holidays. So if you can imagine people who hunt and recreate and use the outdoors in Colorado, the times that they're using those the most is going to be on weekends and holidays. So that is a time that you'll find a lot of our officers in the field. That's when you'll find them very busy. Is the times when people are recreating the most is when we're working the most. So if you really enjoy hunting seasons, and you expect that you're going to come in and work as a game warden because you like hunting, is just remember that you are also going to be working hunting seasons a lot. That's also our busiest time. So we do accommodate scheduling, but I just want to make sure that people are well aware that these are times that we are busy as a staff. And so it's not necessarily a Monday through Friday job, but it does involve a variety of odd hours and shifts. Another thing that comes up a lot too is we get a lot of applicants that kind of see the job like a park ranger, and they assume that they think they're going to be doing a lot of interpretive type jobs or things like that as a park ranger. But all of our park rangers and game wardens are fully commissioned law enforcement officers. So law enforcement is a part of what we do. And a lot of our training is centered around law enforcement to make sure that you are well trained and that you're an adequate officer in the field. So I just kind of want to reinforce that is why we send our folks through a post academy, and just so that they expect that there is going to be a lot of law enforcement type training. So so that is out there as well. And then scheduling. So depending on your job position, some of our scheduling is going to be shift work. So park rangers typically will work based on shifts. District wildlife managers are a little more independent and kind of work as needed, because they're not working necessarily in a park, but they're working based on the seasons that are happening in their districts at the time. So so there is a difference in how the schedules work for both of those positions. I know there's going to be questions, and I'm going to touch back on a few things that have come up in the past. One question that we've gotten in the past is about the post certification. One is the post certification that we're talking about is the Police Officers Standards and Training Commission. So that would apply to all peace officers in Colorado. If you have a commission from another state, you can challenge post in Colorado, and that would require you to take the post test, and then also to conduct a skills test with post. And so if you have questions on that, I would encourage you to take a look at Colorado's post website. There's some good information on how that commission from another state can transfer over, and what you would need to do to make that happen. I get questions a lot about housing, and we do not help you with housing in the first year that you're hired on. Housing is going to be on your own while you're in Denver. That is kind of been done in a couple creative ways. So we do try to put you in touch with the other trainees in the first year before you start working. So we have had some employees who have went in together to just get a rental for the first year and kind of minimize their costs while they're based in Denver. Some people have gotten their own apartments. Some people already live in the metro area. And in a few cases, some people have been able to utilize some state housing if they, have a location or are already currently working in a state location that offers housing. So we do not necessarily help you with the housing portion of it, but there are some ways to kind of minimize the impact on you if you're wondering about how housing works during that first year. I get questions about maybe some past convictions, especially if they're misdemeanors or, traffic offenses and things like that. And if that would disqualify you from working for us. Really, the disqualifying factors are just the ones that are listed on post. So if you have questions about that, if you have a former conviction or something you're wondering about, go to the Colorado Post website, and they do have a list posted there. It's also posted in the job announcement that we put out. Take a look at that list, and you can find any disqualifying convictions on there for that. And then if you have questions on those, you're welcome to email us, and we can look in if you have any that are not listed. I also get a lot of questions about resources for how you study for the written exam and the writing prompt. If you look at those job announcements, it does tell a little bit about the breakdown of how those questions are formulated. And I mentioned them earlier, like some of them are Colorado specific questions, some of them are CPW general knowledge. Some of them are going to be like biology related questions. What I would encourage a lot of people to do is study the CPW website. There is a lot of good resources and information on there that will help you on the written test. If you already come in with a degree, that's also probably going to help you on a few of those questions, especially if it's in the area of natural resources or biology or something along those lines. But generally speaking, the Parks and Wildlife website is going to be a good resource for you. We'll also get the question of how many positions we're hiring for. We don't have that number right now. So we currently have a training class that is going to be with us for the next about 3 months or so. And so they're wrapping up their training year. They are going to fill most of the vacancies that we currently have in the field, with the exception of a few. But the reason that we are hiring positions is because we anticipate that there will be some people who are retiring. We know that there are some new positions that are starting in 2025, so we'll see some movement for promotions and lateral positions happening there. So at this time, we're kind of anticipating that we're going to hire 15 district wildlife managers and probably 15 park rangers. So that's kind of the number we're looking at. So we probably have a total class of 30 officers for 2025. I'll get a lot of questions on drug use. Again, if you look at the job announcement, you'll see that for marijuana, we ask that you have not used marijuana in the last year from the date of hire. So that's January of 2025 back to January of 2024. So 1 year for marijuana, and then all other drugs is 3 years. So we want to see 3 years of no use for all other drugs other than marijuana. And then I also get a lot of people that kind of join these webinars and have reached out about positions, asking about other CPW positions, especially if they're biologists type positions or technicians or other types within the agency because they're not necessarily interested in being a law enforcement officer. That's not really the position that I'm hiring for, but CPW does offer a lot of other non-commissioned positions and other positions throughout our agency. So the agency sits right about 1,000 people. So if you're interested in those positions, I would encourage you to go to the State of Colorado website, sign up for the job announcements and the job alerts, and watch those positions. But the only position that I am hiring for at this moment is these two positions, but there are other CPW positions that are currently out there and open and many open throughout the year. So just want to throw that out there if that's what you're interested in. So I guess with that, I'm going to kind of let Todd and Krista chime in, or if anybody from our HR team has anything that I missed, but we'll take some questions off the chat if there's some that haven't been answered so far.
I do have one that popped up a few times in the chat, and that was if you could just touch on what a day in the life of a park ranger in DWM looks like.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess one thing that I should have mentioned when we did introductions is that I come from a parks background. I've worked in state parks since 2008. I was a ranger, I was a senior ranger, and then I was a park manager. And then Todd, who's on this call, also worked as a district wildlife manager. So hopefully between the two of us, we can answer this question pretty well. But day-to-day work is kind of tough to pin down. Every park and every district is diverse and pretty different. Generally, your park rangers, like a day in your park ranger is going to be kind of centered around your weekends. Our busy season weekends, especially in the summertime when we have boating and camping and things like that, are going to be based on getting ready for the weekends, doing a lot of like management, cleaning up, kind of all the administrative things throughout the week, and then preparing for kind of hordes of people pouring into your park on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then really after the week, day to day, you catch up on administrative work, you catch up on reports, but we do try to stay in the field on the days that we're super busy and when we expect to see lots of people. That also kind of depends on the park that you're in. We do have some parks that are more urban, where you might work more as what you would think of as a police officer, but then you have other rural parks where they don't see quite as much law enforcement, but they're more of your backcountry type ranger or doing things in the mountains. We have some parks where they really see a busy season in the wintertime and not so much the summertime. So it really depends, but day to day, a park ranger is going to be responsible for managing one or two sections of the park, whether it's your entrance stations or your boat inspection stations, your other seasonal summer rangers, maybe a maintenance program, and then also just balancing that with your law enforcement duties. District wildlife managers are kind of the same. They're pretty diverse based on where they're located. But during the hunting seasons, you're typically going to find them in the field, checking hunters, checking fishermen, kind of being proactive and taking on more of a law enforcement role in terms of the season that they're working. Outside of hunting and fishing seasons, you might find them out doing more biological work and doing, population assessments. You might find them doing maintenance. You might find them doing some administrative work, especially with like landowners or other things within their district. So it really just depends on where you're at. But I think in general, that's kind of the day to day. And I guess I'll let Todd chime in if maybe I missed something for either of those positions.
It's tough. Sorry, I was typing answers frantically. I think the question is typical day in the life of DWM. Is that correct?
Yeah, or park ranger. I kind of gave a brief overview, but if I missed something, feel free to correct me.
No, I think you hit a lot of it. The key thing and something that I think is really important, one day is different from the next. And that's what I really enjoy. There's no real routine. I can have a plan for what I think my day is going to be, and one phone call from being on call will change it entirely. But I enjoy that. I like that I'm not stuck doing the same things over and over and over again. Well, that will happen when bear season's hot and heavy. You know, that call that starts at 10 p.m. is going to be about a customer who's dealing with a bear problem. That season will end and you'll start, a different season. So there's beauty in that. And I really enjoy that dichotomy and that breakup, if you will, such that it's not the same thing over and over. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that was, and good point. It is tough to kind of determine what you're going to do day to day because we do law enforcement and we work with the public. It's kind of hard to say what's going to come through on any given day and what's going to happen at any given moment. So that is a good point. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. What other questions do we have in the chat, Krista or Todd or anybody else on the call?
I do have another one, and I apologize if you did already answer this, but I was also have been answering this. But I think some folks are wondering what the actual process of the location assignment looks like.
Yeah, that's a good question. So when you start your training year, when you come back to us in May for your CPW specific training, so one thing that I do is I will create a list of known vacancies at that moment, and that we keep that running list throughout the training year. You would have access to that, and then what we ask of you is to rank those openings on that list of where you would want to go from greatest to least. And so we kind of monitor that throughout the year. And when we go into placement interviews or placement day in October, when the managers come to Denver and meet with you, so we can make a decision on where your first placement is going to be, we look heavily at that list, and then we also bring you in for about a 5 or 10 minute kind of just session with you to just talk about like why are these positions the ones that you want to go to, and why are these ones that you don't want to go to listed. And we really work hard to kind of advocate for you and put you in a position that's going to fit you or your family's needs. So that's kind of how that works, and we take into consideration if there's any reason or that you should or shouldn't go to some district or some park. And so it's we've really kind of worked hard to make sure that we're putting you in a position that's going to work best for you and your family, though. That's kind of the general takeaway. So we do try to send you into one of your preferred locations, whichever those are.
Those were the main two questions I had written down, so I don't know if Todd or Kayla have any.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess I'll ask the HR team if there's anything I miss or anything that you guys want to chime in on too, about the process or just about job duties or functions or anything like that.
I'll chime in here. We've had some questions about the salaries and what they look like year 2 and 3. So due to just not knowing what our salaries could be next year, if there's any kind of changes, we don't have a set salary at the moment for the years 2 and 3.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. And I guess I can talk a little bit to that. The reason that the pay scale is kind of interesting right now is Colorado is working with co-wins, and so there's been a lot of changes to pay, and there's been a lot of reallocations of positions. So there's been a lot of improvements to pay over the last, I would say, probably 2 years. So that's been a big thing for CPW staff and state of Colorado staff in general. So there is also the re-implementation of steps based on your years of service within your position. So that's making some improvements, and it's just been evolving very quickly lately. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Kayla. Todd, have you seen any questions come through on your end that we need to address?
I'm working on one right now that talks a little bit about the process for transferring your duty station once you've served at your initial location for 2 years. And basically to answer that, we have different parks and areas that have openings all throughout the year. And so the process generally is that once you've served in that first 2 years and you see a place you would like to transfer to, you reach out to that park manager, you tell them you're interested in that opening, and they'll have a hiring process for that. And so it's another submitting of a resume and an interview process for that. And then they'll select that candidate. And so that may be you, that may not be you, just depends. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that is. I thought of one question that we do get a lot too, is just what qualities or traits do we look for in candidates? Or if there's specific qualities and traits. And I will say in general, we've been making a pretty hard effort to find a diverse applicant pool. So we are looking for diversity within our workforce, and especially with our parks and wildlife officers. And so that diversity can look for anything from just your background, whether you grew up in an urban or a rural setting, just any variety of things. But we're looking to more represent what Colorado looks like. So sometimes I guess what I would recommend is that, when you have your oral panels and things like that, like those traits really come through sometimes in that face-to-face interview. And so we do try to find where we're getting applicants that are going to be good fits for all the communities that we serve. And so if you think about a district wildlife manager and a park ranger in Colorado, our parks and wildlife officers serve every inch of the state. So district wildlife managers all have districts that cover every square inch of Colorado, and our parks are scattered throughout the communities as well. So it is important to have a diverse work staff. We're not looking for any one type of person. We're just looking for people that can fit come from different skill sets and different backgrounds, and offer a lot of different things that are going to benefit us serving our mission for Colorado. So. I was going to take a look at our Q&A and see if I see anything. And I think I'll just give a minute if people have other questions to type them into the chat. So just remind people, if you do have questions, you can go ahead and type them into the chat now, and we'll try to answer them. I see a question about what is a passing score on the 100-question exam. We don't have set passing scores on that exam. It is dependent on how many people apply for these positions. And then we have to take forward a certain number of applicants through that process. So that is so that number is kind of determined once the quiz results are in. We take a look at the numbers and find where that cutoff lies to take as many folks through the oral panel portion as we can. So it's not a set cutoff prior to the process. I see a question about common disqualifiers for medical and psychological steps. I don't know that I've seen a disqualifier for the medical. I came into this position last year, and this is my second round of hiring, so I have not seen that come through yet. Psychological exams, typically we leave that up to the person that performs that psychological exam, and they will give us kind of a summary on the candidate. And we have seen a few of those come through where it just there might be a few things that trying to think of how they grade those, and maybe Krista, maybe you can remind me, but I think that's just more, it's also kind of a risk assessment, and I think they'll give us a quick summary about whether they think there's any significant psychological maybe red flags with that assessment. Do you remember, Krista, exactly, like, try to think of like how they word that in the summary that they send us?
I think how you described it is pretty accurate. I think it's kind of like a personality type assessment almost, that they just make sure that your suitability for a position in law enforcement is a good match. I think it's a lot to do with like your temperament and decision-making skills and kind of things of that nature.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and really through this whole process, what we're really doing is assessing risk. So we are giving our Parks and Wildlife officers have a lot of authority, and they are peace officers, and we want to keep the trust of the public. So we do take seriously who we give a commission to and who we don't. So when we look at these, especially like the psychological and the polygraph results, we really are just doing a risk assessment about how risky is this person to bring within a position like this. So I can't really say that there's a hard cutoff. Like these organizations often just give us a they give us a summary and kind of leave that decision up to us.
Yes. I did see another question in here that I think would be a good one to answer. And it says, do you find yourself in stressful and emergent situations with your positions? But Tyler, I think it'd also be maybe good to talk about the law enforcement aspect of these jobs and what that could entail.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are moments like our if you think about our Parks and Wildlife officers and the areas that they serve, there are moments when they can be put into some risky situations and some high risk situations, especially maybe with law enforcement, or maybe it could be like a rescue type situation and things like that. We really try to train our officers very well to be prepared for those situations and how to handle some of that stress in advance. But yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that law enforcement can be sorry, can be it can be stressful at times. Um, I don't think that our officers do as much law enforcement as what you would typically find with a city or county officer. But we do have officers who get themselves into some situations that are very high risk. And we've seen officers conduct some rescues, especially with like water rescues or avalanche, backcountry. We've had officers involved in like evacuation of homes during fires. And we've had officers that have been involved in some very high profile law enforcement situations. So one example of that would be some of the school shootings. Some of our officers were the first on scene for those and helping clear rooms and get victims to safety. Um, uh, I will say I think we're pretty fortunate that we don't see a lot of assaults on peace officers, which is pretty fortunate. And I think our numbers in general are pretty low about our use of force incidents. But I also just want to be very open is that they do happen, to some of our officers occasionally. And but I think our officers are very well trained, and I think they do a lot to de-escalate and to avoid having to use force when whereas I think what you see in the news is often not really representative of what's really happening in the field. At least my perspective of working for CPW. So yeah, I mean that stressful situations are going to arise in your field, but our priority is also to make sure that we're safe and that we're doing things in a safe manner too. So we're not going to ask people or force people to go into a situation that's going to harm their safety in any way. Yeah, I kind of see some questions based on like where positions would be filled and where people could potentially be placed in their first year. I will say the last couple of years we've had positions all over the state, so in every corner, and so it's been a variety of different environments. Like we've seen people in the Southwest and really mountain rural type places. We've seen people in far Northeast Colorado. We've seen people on the Front Range and some of our urban locations. And so the state is growing fast, and so are the needs and the demands on CPW. So we're finding that we've had positions kind of all over each year. So there's kind of potential to, if you're interested in going in a particular location, it's probably likely we're going to have something that fits that need. But of course we can't guarantee that that's where you're going to end up, but there's a lot of diversity within the openings and the vacancies. Do you guys see any other questions? I see a question about setting up ride-alongs. ride-alongs are a great option, especially if you're interested in getting into this job. I would encourage you to contact like a local office and or call your local district wildlife manager or your local park and try to set that up. If you're really having trouble, setting up a ride along, you can always get a hold of myself, and my email's listed. I think, well, I don't know where my email's listed, but if you type tyler.sewald@state.co.us, we can help you arrange a ride along wherever you're living. But call your local CPW office or park, and they should be able to get you set up to do a ride along. I also see a question about shift work for park rangers and whether that's an 8-hour day or a 10-hour day. And it depends. A lot of our parks have went to 10-hour shifts. We're doing 4 10s generally. Our park rangers work 40-hour weeks. They are eligible for overtime, but we try to keep you within that 40 each week, just to kind of balance your work-life balance. But a lot of parks have been figuring out that a 10-hour shift is probably a little bit more accommodating to have a 3-day weekend and things like that. So that's not true at every park. Some people prefer 8-hour shifts. So it kind of varies, but 10 hours are becoming more and more popular and common.
Mhm.
Do you guys see or have any other ones that have popped up?
Tyler, can you speak to the process of the oral panel? I've seen that come up a few times.
Yeah, I should have reviewed that, and I might lean on Krista too. So the oral panels, like I mentioned, you're going to have a couple people. I think this year it's going to be 3 panelists that are going to sit on your oral panel. You have 40 minutes. They're going to ask you a variety of questions, kind of related to some of the job duties that we do in CPW. Some of those are going to be, some questions related to maybe dealing with like a difficult customer, whether you're district wildlife manager or park ranger. We're going to throw some scenario questions at you. And then we do have a 5-minute presentation. I don't recall how we ran that 5-minute presentation, but last year I think it was on a topic of your choice. But I felt like we had a little more parameter on that, and I don't have it right in front of me. Krista, do you recall what we did for that oral panel last year by chance? Off the top of your head?
So the requirements on it, in my understanding, have always been pretty loose, and just that it is a natural resource topic of your choosing. So
Okay, I think you're exactly
but the
right.
format and the topic itself is kind of up to your discretion.
Yeah, and the reason we include that is just kind of let your personality come through, and just to see, your creativity, or how you answer a question like that, because a lot of what we do, kind of Todd alluded to it in our day-to-day, is like you just don't know what you're doing, and sometimes you are kind of pulled away to do a sudden like education program or talk to the public, or do something that is on the fly. And so it's good just to kind of see how people respond to having to do a presentation for 5 minutes, and to assess your public speaking skills, and how well you can organize your thoughts, and how well you can convey the information that you're wanting to convey. So that's kind of the purpose of the 5-minute presentation. And it is interesting to see how people handle that question. It's just a good way to kind of get an idea of who you are individually. Let's see, if the presentation goes over 5 minutes, will we be docked? You say slightly over. If it's slightly over a couple seconds, no, I think you're fine. What we don't want to see is somebody run into like 6, 7, 8 minutes, like well over. We're just asking, for kind of a 5-minute window into who you are and how you present, and and think. So no, not necessarily docked, but we just don't want to see somebody kind of ramble for 10 minutes, and in that case we might have to kind of cut you off.
And if I can add to that, I don't think you
Mhm.
would be docked, but I think you would actually be cut off. Like
I
you're
think, yeah,
just because the amount of questions that they're going to ask you on the oral panel can only are kind of designed so that they'll use up the other 35 minutes of the oral panel time. So they'll probably cut you off in order to be able to get through the questions that they want to ask you.
yeah, thank you. I think you're exactly right. Somebody asked about shifts for DWMs. So DWMs don't necessarily work shifts. They do kind of work a little more independently because they are assigned a district. So how they want to work that district is up to them. So they're not necessarily on a calendar, but they may have to respond if they're on call, or they sometimes are just working. They might work several days in a row. They could work, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10 days in a row if it's a really busy season. You could see somebody who maybe works a 16-hour shift if they need to, or work a very long day. Um, and then other times they might have a stretch of time off. So um, for our district wildlife managers, the way that it works for them right now is that they're considered 7K employees. So they have to work, at a minimum, they have to work 160 hours in a 28-day period. So if you think about that, they just have to work a 40-hour week is what it averages out to. But how they want to work those 160 hours in that 28-day period is really up to them. So their scheduling is a little more flexible for their positions.
Hey, Tyler,
Yeah,
you mind if I just add to that a little bit?
yeah, please.
So as a DWM, typically we make up our schedules about a month in advance. Within that month, you'll be telling your coworkers within the area and your supervisor the days you're going to be on and off. Within that, you're going to be assigned on-call days. In a typical area, that's going to be somewhere between 5 and 8 on-call days. And what on-call is from a midnight to midnight period. If there's a wildlife emergency that's reported, then typically State Patrol or your local dispatch will call you and share that information with you. And you'll decide, depending on policies and everything, whether that's something you need to respond to that night or that day. And so it can change what your schedule looks like as far as what you thought you were going to do in that day versus what you're actually going to do in that day. When it comes to, the day that's in front of you and you were, going to be working that normal day and say, I'm a dad with some kids at home and a kid gets sick, I can just notify the local staff in the local office that I'm going to take a sick day that day because I got to stay home with the kiddo. And that really doesn't change stuff up too much, doesn't hurt things too bad. If you're on call, you might have to shop around and get a neighboring officer to take that on call for you. But generally, our jobs as a DWM is quite flexible. And that's one of the benefits that I see with our scheduling. So hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. There's a question about what type of professional development trainings are offered as your career progresses. It's been my experience that there's been a lot of professional development training. So from the time that I was an entry-level park ranger, I had some opportunities to go out of state for training, did 2-week training with the Coast Guard. And then kind of as I progressed through my career, I went into more professional development, like leadership training has been very heavy within CPW. And I will say that as an agency, there's been a lot of effort to send people from all ranks into more leadership type training, especially if they're working their way into like supervisory roles. And so there's a lot of opportunity, and it's not uncommon to be sent, to a leadership school or something out of state. And and just in the last year, I think Todd and myself have both been through a program like that, and multiple programs throughout our career. So, and then also we do a lot of training outside of the state minimum requirements just for our jobs as officers and for our jobs as managers, as land managers. I would say that we far exceed what the minimums are for being a peace officer in Colorado. So I think that's one thing that Colorado Parks and Wildlife does a very good job about is supporting all their staff to continue their growth throughout their career. There's a question about after your initial placement, if rangers are rotated in like the military, or would they be able to stay in one place if desired? After you're placed to your first location as a district wildlife manager or park ranger, that's just your position. So there's no expectation that you need to leave that district or that park. If you really enjoy where you're working at and that's really where you wanted to be, I mean, you really could spend your whole career there if that's what you want to do. So there is no expectation that you move around or only spend a limited time in one position. So we've had people that have spent their whole career at the same location, and then we've had other people that have, that have just taken opportunities as they opened up to move around the state. So so it really depends on you and what you're looking for, and if you're ready for a move or a change of pace, then you can watch for those positions and take it as they come. So kind of looks like we caught up on all the Q&A stuff. I guess let's just leave it open for another minute and see if anybody has any last minute questions or anything that we didn't answer. But if not, then I think we can kind of wrap up this Q&A. And if people have questions, I believe Kayla's contact information is on the job posting, so you're always welcome to send an email there if you need to, and we can always get an answer if there's something that we didn't answer tonight. And then this is also recorded, I believe, so I think we're going to post this to our YouTube page. So if you go to Colorado Parks and Wildlife's YouTube page, you should be able to find this webinar. If you want to review it or share it with anybody that wasn't able to make it tonight, feel free to do so. And I guess while we're waiting for that, like Todd, Krista, Kayla, I'll let you guys kind of take this opportunity. Is there anything that we missed or anything you guys want to have any final thoughts on the hiring process?
I just wanted to reiterate, transcripts are required if you're using education, and you can apply at the government jobs website for Colorado.
Perfect, thank you. Krista, do you have any last thoughts?
I honestly don't. I was also just going to reiterate that it was posted, going to be posted on YouTube, and we're also going to post hopefully an informative Q&A document on the website as well, based on the questions asked in here, in case you didn't catch one of the answers. But also we're all available to answer questions via email throughout this whole process. So.
Yep. Yeah, and if you guys have not looked, CPW just launched a new website a week or two ago. So if you guys have not been there, it's worth to go take a look at that as well. Todd, any last thoughts or words?
I'll just say thanks to everyone that came and stuck around with us. I appreciate it. The one thing I will reiterate, all successful candidates that make it through the hiring process, you will go through a post academy and become peace officers in the state of Colorado, enforcing the laws within the state of Colorado.
Yeah, can't stress that enough. Just for people that are unaware that yeah, there is a law enforcement component to what we do. So thanks for reminding us of that. So okay, I don't see any other questions coming through. So we'll let everybody get back to their Friday night, and it's Friday the 13th. So hopefully everybody stays safe, and we look forward to seeing you guys applying. And if you guys have questions, feel free to reach out, and we're happy to take them as you come. And otherwise, we hope to see you in the process over the next couple of months. So thanks for your time, and everybody have a good night.